Hello and welcome to All Things Esoteric Podcast. Today is November 22nd, 2021, and it is 6:30 p.m. I am Kate, and welcome. Anthony, you are here with me as well.
Hi, guys.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Yeah? Did you have a good day?
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm having some really powerful movements with these energies going on between Scorpio and Taurus and solar eclipse and all of that I talked about last week. And I know there's a lot of moon videos out there, but guys, watch it. It's really happening not just with me but with other people, where we're beginning to see on deeper levels just areas in our lives and that have to do with money and things and how we perceive them. So that's been really cool. And I recorded some of it today, so hopefully do a video with some of the stuff that came to me today. Just kind of came channeling in waves. It was that Venus energy that we're going to be talking about. I tell you that right now, it's pure fire.
That actually is the element attributed to her.
Yes, I know. I had to go to the gym. I had been studying her for 2 or 3 days, and I had all this Venus energy. Like I could just feel her.
Oh, yeah. As soon as I opened up the book to the NETZACH section, I got this warm, fuzzy feeling in my stomach. It was very nice.
I tell you what.
She's so nice.
Tell you what, she's legit. So I'm going to open up here just to give you a little rundown what this is going to look like. I'm going to open up on just the sky tonight, what's going on, any significant changes astrologically, and then we'll be talking about Venus. So with that, we're only going to talk about the outer planets with a couple exceptions. One is the sun has moved into Sagittarius. So that's a monumental change. For another 30 days, we'll be experiencing the Sagittarius season. And Sagittarius, of course, runs the 9th house astrologically, and that sign belongs to Jupiter. So here we've got in the 9th house just issues more coming to kind of like a spiritual head. Trying to understand in a more deeper meaning, because it's above the bottom chart, but it's trying to understand a more deeper meaning to really what's going on out there in the spiritual world and how that relates to structured religion and God and what we've been told. And right now we've got we've got Jupiter in Aquarius home, just bringing that Aquarian, Uranian forward thinking of spirituality, and it's sitting there tonight. Of course, it moves, but tonight it's sitting at 24 degrees. So it's in its own home, not in its own sign, but it's in its own home. So that shift is important, and Sagittarians are represented by the words I perceive, and the archer who shoots his arrow into the air. Though he knows not its destiny. So it's aiming for the higher plane, the higher way. So that's significant going into, of course, the holidays, you know?
Right.
So that's a change.
Yeah. Fire is the highest plane in the 4 Kabbalistic worlds. It's the most spiritual plane.
Mm-hmm. And it's mutable. So Sagittarians are flexible. They're wide, they're girthy, they're open, they're big, they're large. They want to see the whole thing. They look into things much like Scorpio, preceded the 8th house, Scorpio's home. So remember, we're bringing all the qualities forward. So everybody's kind of connected to everybody, and we talked about that in one of the podcasts, how we are one and stuff. But that's significant. And also Venus, who we'll be speaking about tonight, I wanted to bring her in, is still in Sagittarius, and it takes about a little over a year for Venus to travel through the zodiac. And with it being in Capricorn, it's giving it that Saturnian, earthy, subdued Venus, and it's in the 8th house, conjunct Pluto.
To me, Venus in Capricorn says, what can you do for me?
Mm-hmm. And it's got that Saturn. Got that Saturn. So in the ways of love, you'll be drawn and attracted to a more mature and experienced partner, somebody who's older.
A practical choice.
A pragmatic manner. That's right. Because in this sign, your feelings are kept under control, and you're going to be seeking things like loyalty and dependability, and you're going to be security conscious because Capricorn is cardinal Earth, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that going on in there. And so Uranus still in retrograde. It's going to be in retrograde until, what do I have here? When is it coming out? January 2022, out of retrograde, which means it's going to begin that forward movement. Tonight it's currently sitting in the 12th house. And again, Gemini is sitting there with us at 1 degree in the North Node. So with Ceres, these messages of wanting to come out in an intellectual manner, right? Wanting to be spoken about, these things that have been hidden, these things that people don't know about, these older ways, esoteric ways, right? So that message is
old tonight.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I know I can sense that. You've prepared and I've prepared, and we talked about how, it was a very moving experience to look into Venus and what she's trying to do. And so what I love about Venus, too, just jumping back to her quick, is she does move through, the signs quickly, but she stays a whole month in each sign, and wants, to come in and be like, here I am, I'm coming through your house, and I'm only going to stay a short time, but boy, I'm going to leave an imprint because I won't be back till next year.
And it's interesting that it's close to the 28 days of the moon, the other, most feminine planet.
Right. She is considered an inner planet and a luminary, along with the sun and the moon. And we'll go into that. She's the morning star and the evening star, and she's the brightest in the sky, yada, yada. That comes in when we start talking about her. So we know the Uranian themes go back to the podcast. I encourage you. We've really dug into that deeply, what's going on. There's no need to belabor that because, it has barely moved, and it won't move quickly. So we're in a season of financial changes, how we view our money. But Taurus comes into the conversation tonight where Uranus is, because Venus rules Taurus and rules Libra, right? So we'll definitely be talking about Taurus a little more later. Neptune is sitting 20 degrees, like I said, in Pisces. It's on the midheaven. So what are we talking about? Piscean themes. Oh my, higher spirituality. Here comes that theme again. With Jupiter in the 9th in Aquarius wanting to push us out in airy ways about revolutionary thought. And then our midheaven, the shiniest part in our chart right now, is in Neptune, just the highest octave of the moon, and expressing true spirituality and psychic connection. It's a deep psychic connection placement when Neptune is there in Pisces. So that's really going.
Is Neptune still going to be in Pisces next month when the sun's in Pisces, or are they going to be conjunct?
Yes, because they will at one point be conjunct, absolutely, because Neptune takes a very long time to traverse.
Don't you think something bad is going to happen? Because weren't you telling me the other day about you correlated an aspect of Uranus to the astro world thing? Or was that Neptune?
Yeah, I don't remember that. Sorry.
How do you not remember that? That was fucking awesome, and you don't even remember it.
You
basically explained the astral world thing with astrology, and you don't even remember it.
I don't. But it'll probably come back to me. Neptune is conjunct in Pisces, an interesting little asteroid called Pallas Athena, and we won't go into her deep. But she gives real deep strategies of relating and deep perceptual skill, and whether one is willing or not to do things that please another. So it's almost like the theme here with the 9th and the 10th house right now is, okay, I know we've done things this way, And I know that you really want them to continue, but we need to really look at things keenly and begin to ask the tough questions of all this information coming out. Why haven't we been told, and what can we do about it, and how can we move forward, and how can we evolve, which is important, but also integrate what was important and not lose it all. So it's a very tricky time, right? Very, very tricky time.
Of course.
The other thing we have to talk about you, Anthony, for just a minute, and that is tonight Anthony's chart has the moon in Cancer as the first house, and his natal chart has the moon in Cancer in the first house. So they basically are almost conjunct, touching each other, which is going to give you just some really deep insight, psychically deep insight, with Neptune in Pisces on the midheaven. It's working with the ascendant, so it's going to be powerful.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Last planet was Pluto, and we know Pluto's the Capricorn. We're not going to belabor that. We know what that means. We're seeing it happen before our eyes. Structures being torn down, changed, rising completely different or better. So, anything else I wanted to say? Looking at my notes here. No, that's pretty much it about the sky chart tonight. And I'm going to hand it back over to you, Anthony. I know you're going to bring in the Kabbalah first for us this evening, and
yes.
Look forward to hearing that. So go ahead.
Venus is attributed to NETZACH on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. The English translation, the word they like to use for it is victory. The magical image is a beautiful naked woman. Its virtue is unselfishness. Its vice is unchastity, lust. Its symbols are the lamp and girdle, the rose, and the NETZACH text. The seventh path is called the Occult Intelligence because it is the refulgent splendor of the intellectual virtues which are perceived by the eyes of the intellect and the contemplation of faith, which brings us to NETZACH is basically, we touched on it last week, it is the intuition, as on the other side is Had, the intellect. And when you look at that last part, perceived by the eyes of intellect and the contemplations of faith, most people would normally associate just the contemplations of faith, with their intuition. But when we're reminded that the tree of life, the way the emanations go, we're born, we're created, it's in numerical order, 1 to 2 to 3, and so on. NETZACH is the seventh sphere. Had is the eighth sphere. So as NETZACH is created, Had is still within it. So it has to be the eyes of intellect and the contemplations of faith. And when you think about it, when you're tapping into your own intuition, you have to use some intellect. You have to analyze it. You have to make sure, are these just, my hopes, am I being emotional about this? You have to really analyze, is this actually an intuitive message, or is this, my own mind? You really have to sort it out.
That is absolutely true, and that's something I was going to bring in. Astrologically, you can see that as well, where Venus is identified with two different signs and two different expressions, and I'll get into that later. But it ties right into what you just said. It is, you've got two different expressions, earth and air in Venus. And the soul ruler, esoterically, is Gemini. And this is where you have exactly what you said with the higher intellect of Mercury, right? Being able to raise it up to a place of health and balance so that you can send it out to that harmony that the seventh house Libra is seeking.
Oh yeah, that brings us to polarity, which is a big part of this. And I actually have a quote on this, I'll just read it now. It's from the Mystical Kabbalah, The Fortune, go get it. We shall comprehend the nature of NETZACH in the microcosm best if we remember that it is the sphere of Venus with all that it implies. Translated from the symbolic language of the Kabbalah into plain English, it means that we are concerned here with the function of polarity, which is a very great deal more than sex as popularly conceived. And this also goes into what we're going to get into later with the bearded Venus. So if we continue, one thing I left out, the spiritual experience, the vision of beauty, triumphant. I mean, that just goes right with Venus. Here's more on NETZACH. This is another quote. In NETZACH, a particular form of force represents itself as a type of beings, flowing backwards and forwards over the boundaries of manifestation in an exceedingly elusive manner. Such beings have no individualized personalities, but are like armies with banners that can be seen in the sunset clouds. In Had, however, individualization into units has taken place, and there is continuity of existence. All mind is group mind in NETZACH, but in Had, the human mind has its beginnings. And this kind of elucidates that intuition is really tapping into the higher, the group mind.
That's interesting. The higher mind, the higher way to think in all ways, not just like spiritually connected to spirit, God, all that is, however you view that, but collectively on Earth, right?
Right, and it's a different mode of thinking, a different mode of being. When you're thinking rationally, when you're thinking logically, like feelings are the complete opposite of rationality. Like everyone has that one friend where it's like, it makes no sense. Why are they with that person? It's treating them terribly. Sure, because you're looking at it rationally. You don't have your feelings involved. Like they are complete. They're on the opposite poles of each other. They're complete opposites: feelings and logic, rationality. Had and NETZACH.
That's a really good comparison. It's an excellent comparison. Yeah, it makes it more understandable. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking at it now on a Tree of Life. And then, of course, that goes towards what? The next one after that
is Had. It turns into Had, like we said. So the intellectual part it's still in there, within there, because you need to use some intellect to really tap into your intuition properly. So, and so the mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune continues, and it goes into a little bit about the Aphrodite cult, because Aphrodite, is the Greek Venus, and this is what it says. The Aphrodite cult was something very much more than simple performance of an animal function. It was concerned with the subtle interaction of life force between two factors, the curious flow and return, stimulus and reaction, which plays so important part in relation of sexes, but extends far beyond the sphere of sex. And that just goes to, the give and take in relationships, in general. Because, Venus is more about, sex and, romantic relationships. It's about interpersonal relationships in general. Like stimulus and reaction, sure, it could be sexual like you're thinking, but it could also be like just think about, it could be the most shallow thing possible. Like think about in high school, these guys want a ride somewhere. They're pretending to be my friend, but I want to get into that party. So, it's a mutual exchange. Maybe I go to that party and I meet a lead guy or some other guy and maybe a pretty girl or two, and it's great. It doesn't have to be like, oh, these guys are using me, I shouldn't do this. Well, you know what? Use them back. A little give and take. I mean, it's not the ideal, but that is how a lot of human interaction works.
Yeah, that's really true. That's really true, and that's where you see it evident in earthy Taurus, the more sensual nature of Venus, at the person, they call it the personality level in esoteric astrology, or soul level, where planets and signs sit, and it's in the personality level because it's very earthy, and then you have it in Libra. It's also the personality level, but it's higher. It's in a higher form of the personality.
So it's exalted in Libra and home in Taurus, or the other way around?
They're both exalted in Venus in Libra. They have to be.
Those are the two, so that's always interesting.
Yeah.
We want to always keep in mind the two zodiac signs that it's exalted and home to, or it's where its domicile is.
Well, absolutely, and I know it's exalted in Libra, and I know it's exalted in Taurus, meaning that that's the owner, and then of course the fall would be the opposite signs. So how Taurus expresses its love, its opposite is Scorpio. So it falls in Scorpio. And how Libra expresses it is different than Aries, and we know this. Look at the 7th house versus the 1st house. So it doesn't express, it's not that it can't, it just doesn't, it's not its natural position like you're talking about, knowing the rise and the fall and whether a planet does well or not in a particular sign is really important. And that's called the planetary powers, is what you're talking about there. Venus is ruled by Taurus and Libra, and it's detriment in Scorpio and Aries. In Pisces, it's exalted, and in Virgo, it falls. Because if it's exalted in Pisces, the opposite of Pisces is Virgo.
Oh, okay.
And that's how that works. So yeah, it is ruled by both and does very well there. As long as it's balanced. Your Venus can do well anywhere, but the bigger question is, what's it communicating, and who is it communicating, and how is it communicating, and where is it communicating, and is it even communicating and related?
If Venus is so social, I mean, you have to remember you are who your friends are, so it matters, who it's communicating with.
Right, and she is beauty and love. And, the masculine sun rules spirit, which is the life principle. Feminine moon is the builder of the form. And androgynous Mercury, which we discussed, is the reasoning mind, vehicle of self-consciousness and separateness. And it's the reason part of us that we become conscious of ourselves, our intellect, we separate and we evolve. And feminine Venus is the goddess of love and beauty. And through love, we're conscious of others. This is now coming from Isabel Hickey, classic work on spiritual astrology. Just really quick, I'm going to read this. Through love, we are conscious of others and can understand the principle of union and achieve unity. Life, form, and reason are necessities of human existence. Venus changes existence to living through the addition of love, art, and beauty in all the departments of physical life. Venus is also the planet of harmony, cooperation, and refinement. So
Venus really does turn existence to living. I mean, especially from a male point of view, like, I have, my stuff in my place as it is, it works, I survive.
Right.
And, when you get a girlfriend, you move in with a girl, all of a sudden she's, making the place nice. There's, like, air fresheners and candles, and there's cooking, and well, this is fucking living. We're not just surviving anymore. Like,
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Right, and thus, we're going to get into her deeper, but she is seen as the mother. And you're like, well, that's Cancer. And it is, but she's also, I have Venus conjunct my moon in my 8th house, natally. And that is the nurse. That is the healer. That is the person that wants to help the boo-boos go away, especially to the feminine, because it's conjunct the moon. You have two feminine archetypes working tightly together in the same sign of Cancer. It gets pretty intense there. I had to really balance that, but that's a story for later. Were you wanting to go on there?
I have a couple quotes about the Greek Hetaira, Hetaira, Hetaira. It's their word for prostitute, but as I'm about to describe, it's not really a direct translation. And the relevance here is because the Hetairas worked at the Aphrodite Temple, which is the Greek Venus.
Yes.
And it just goes to show their different idea of love.
Yes.
The function of the Hetaira was to minister to the intellect of her clients as well as their appetite. She was a hostess as well as a mistress, and to her resorted the philosophers and poets to receive inspiration and to sharpen their wits. For it is well realized that there is no greater inspiration to an intellectual man than society of vital and cultured woman. And there's a second one that goes with it. This art was not simply that of provoking passion, but of adequately satisfying it on all levels of consciousness, not simply by gratification of the physical sensations of the body, but by the subtle etheric exchange of magnetism. And it is for this reason that our sex life, both physiologically and socially, is so unstable and unsatisfactory. From 1935.
Tell you, that first quote is really profound to me. Like, it just struck a really deep chord in me, and I totally get that. One of the things that I appreciate about my partner is that intellectual attraction, like the ability for us to have really intelligent conversations. We're on the same wavelength, and although he has no interest in any of this stuff that I talk about, like, he doesn't study that. He brings conversation that I don't know about, and I bring conversation he doesn't know about, and it just works. But it's that there's a word for that, isn't it? Sexosapien, where you're attracted.
Sapiosexual.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Where you're attracted to someone's intellect. I get that. Would you mind reading that quote again?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good quote. The function of the Hetaira I always keep fucking up because I wrote it down wrong. The function of the Hetaira was to minister to the intellect of her clients as well as their appetite. She was a hostess as well as a mistress, and to her resorted the philosophers and poets to receive inspiration and to sharpen their wits. For it was well realized that there is no greater inspiration to an intellectual man than the society of a vital and cultured woman.
You know, it really follows in line with the symbol of Venus. I'm just going to talk about this quick. And
no, you can go into what you're going into. That was my last couple quotes.
Oh, okay, that's fascinating. Part. Yeah, thank you. That was some deep stuff, and I think that's really and let's just say this before I go into the symbolism. You know, are we seeing that today? Is that what we're seeing in women?
Oh yeah, I don't think anything has changed since 1935. I mean, I don't think it's just like a product of modern society. Well, super modern society, sure, but now people really they don't have any conscious idea, at least, well, especially men, that, you know, it has to be more than physical, more than you kind of like them. Like in the quote, the subtle etheric exchange of magnetism, polarity. It's about opposites attract. It's about, you know, it's all energy math, which can be explained in a graphic form called comparing your charts, you know,
right?
The chart synthesis. What do you call it? That's what you call it, right?
Chart synthesis. Yeah, you can. That's one word.
Yeah, it's all about the non-physical energies at play as well as the physical attraction.
The symbol of Venus is the circular spirit above the cross. Represents the spirit overcoming matter through love. That is, you know, of everything that we're going to talk about Venus tonight, because we're about to get into her, right? Really talk about her. Let's remember that is where she's going, is to bring everything to the purest, highest form of love. So there are many degrees of love. And Venus is the power of cohesion and attraction. She is magnetism herself. And she draws things together in a synthesis. So you've got the circle of spirit above the cross. And if you hold it, you know, in your hand, it's supposed to represent a mirror. Which is interesting, how that all tied together. But words for her is magnetic attracting power and feminine receptive force, and not she's polite. You know, I have found in my research she is not a brass, overpowering force.
She's not a Queen of Wands. She's the Empress.
Our social urges, when you look at where it's the planet that it's ruling and the sign that it's ruling, you've got Taurus and you've got Western, you've got Taurus and you've got Libra, and then esoterically it brings in Gemini. So you've got social urges and affection. This is beauty, and it's also values. Remember, here in Libra, it takes on a more Saturnian type of energy, and Libra is about boundaries and about balancing the scales and having harmony. And this is where we also get harmony in the voice, because Libra is air, so it's communicating beautiful melodious songs. It's the sonnets, it's the poets, the dreamers, the singers of love, and it's a love of luxury. It's where Taurus and Earth, this luxurious, earthy, fixed nature, and it rules the Venus blood and the higher creative centers, the throat and larynx. And so we've got the second earthly, materialistic part of Venus, and then we have the seventh, the cultured and aesthetic Venus. So seventh house is more of a higher type of expression, whereas Taurus tends to keep it just on the earth. Remember how I talked about last week, Taurus isn't really interested in going down into Scorpio's, Pluto's cave? You know, It's just not. I mean, he can talk about it, I guess, but you know, he's not really interested in going down in there. He wants to stay up top on his comfy bed with all of the comforts and all of the luxuries around him. And it really is also impressionability. And the word gentleness kept coming up too, which is why I saw her as more just the feminine, soft nature.
And to me, the earthy part also kind of strikes me as engaging in the physical. I mean, that's why in Christian mysticism and Kabbalah, the feminine is so demonized because that's the physical, where the physical is sex, physical is drugs, physical is, the opposite of spiritual.
Right, and that's just not true.
Right, but to me, of Venus and Taurus, to me, I think of an indulgent goddess kind of type figure.
Right. Yeah, and this is
right,
where
because she's not demonic, but the feminine energy does like to indulge. I mean, that's kind of, it's a good part of what, Babylon's about, and she's like a synthesis of Venus and the moon and Saturn. And, that's a little complicated.
Yeah. Whereas Venus is more beauty and love and that gentle, like, softer side. Mars is that desire and lust energy. This is where it's really fascinating. I like to, do a lot of psychological charts looking into why people are the way they are, especially like serial killers or sexual people, sexual victims, sexual perpetrators harming victims. And I just like to look at, what's going on? What would cultivate someone to do this? And often you'll see that Mars backing right up into Venus or in a really hard aspect to Venus. And he's, at times you can see him even choking out her beauty with his fierce. I want to give Mars a bad name, because we're going to talk about him next week. But wow, Mars is serious energy, and it's where that desire nature can really be not right. And this is where we have harmful things done to people in sexual ways, because she does represent that as well. It was fascinating what you said about the prostitutes having this, really large intellect.
Right.
Can you not see how that would appeal to a man? Or, you know, a partner. It doesn't have to be a man to a man, you know, or a man to a woman, excuse me. Just your partner in general, how that is appealing to have
adequately satisfying on all levels of consciousness is the quote.
Right. Not that, you know, if they're not kind of your match in that area, that, you know, you should run off and leave somebody like that. I'm just saying you'll find that the relationships, you know, doesn't get boring because you're each are intellectually stimulating your own lives, which thus spills over into your partnerships, right?
Of course. If you have a conversation with someone, you're going to be so much more attracted to them. I mean, if you get to know them, the sex is going to be better. I mean, it's satisfying on all levels of consciousness.
Well, and it goes back to what is your purpose for the sex, you know, and, you know, if it's just a wham, bam, you know.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's a I believe personally, this is me, you know, because I've studied sexual energy, you know, sometimes, because that's a deep conversation, but like, and I might be way off, you know, this is where maybe I need to be, you know, like more open to something, but I just think that if we have a lot of misuse of our sexual energy and we keep spilling and releasing and putting it in places, you know, it's potent. And Venus is potent and Mars is potent. And it's meant to procreate, and Venus wants to create a living thing, right? She wants
sexual energy is creative energy. You
That's right.
Babies
exactly
that you
right.
can create more than that. I mean,
That's
if something has the power to create babies, maybe you should use it wisely.
That's right. And people that I have helped with...
And that's not just about babies, to be clear.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I see it like people that I help. Again, it shows up where, you know, if they have a lot of partners, a lot of people, a lot of activity there, you know, their own energies don't seem to be balanced and harmonic. They have a lot going on. There's a lot of drama. And so, you know, there's a lot to be said about that misuse of Venus there, because everyone that person's been with, if they haven't cleaned up their karma and cleaned up their energy about it and kept their energy pure and in-centered and not stale, they're bringing that right into you, man. They're bringing that right into you. You're becoming one. It's no joke. There's a reason why the Bible mentions it, and other antiquity talks about the oneness and the sexual act, all the way from India to Egypt to Africa to the West, everywhere.
So what you're saying is you can be a healthy whore if you work at it. You know, just get enough energy cleansing in, and you know, get your exercise in.
That's the way to look at it.
If you have friendly relationships with
man.
people, I mean, you know, you're always talking to me all the time. Not all the time, but we've talked about a couple of times before. You know, there's polyamory, and there's all kinds of odd, you know, ways of having relationships that work. And
that's right, and that's why. But
don't
you know,
I'm talking about the whore.
I'm talking about the ones that don't have their crap together. You know, the ones that, as a result of all the energetic inappropriate in that, not that you shouldn't have sex. I don't think that at all.
Don't be a sex addict.
I mean, that inappropriate connection. Let's talk about porn too. You know, I mean,
not even saying don't be a whore. Just don't be an addict with it. Don't let it get out of control.
I wanted to mention just astronomy here for a minute, segue over to that really quick and then come back. But Venus spins backwards. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, man. She spins backwards, the opposite of Earth. So she wants to be noticed. Not only does she spin backwards, but she is outside of sun and the moon, you know, brightest luminary out there.
What if we're spinning backwards and she's spinning the right way?
Yeah,
I mean,
really.
We just say which way is the right way.
Well, you know, I'm not even going to touch that. She's 162 million miles away, and she is the hottest planet in our solar system with surface temperatures high enough to turn lead into liquid.
And
She
you
has
always like to add up numbers. What does 162 add up to? One of your favorite numbers.
9.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I missed that. There are 1,500 volcanoes that cover her surface.
Wow.
Okay, so let's just talk about that a minute.
Fire.
Fire! She goes from fire.
NETZACH is attributed to fire.
Come on, man. You know, it also is the only planet in our solar system to be named after a female figure. How about that? There are asteroids, yes, and dwarf planets.
Isn't Luna female?
Did you know that Aries and Aphrodite had a child called Eros?
I've heard of that before.
And Eros is an asteroid you can plot in your chart.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, yeah. It says a lot, but that's a sidestep. Okay, back to Venus can be observed with the naked eye at both dawn and dusk. And I'm going to get into mythology here, and please jump in, whatever you know. I don't have a firm grasp on it, but I know that her symbols in mythology, in the Greek mythology, were the rose, the dove, and the swan.
Right.
And in 700 BC, Hesiod, the Greek poet, talked about the Cronus, the leader of the Titans, castrating his father, Uranus, the sky god, and he threw his genitals into the sea. Have you heard this story? No. Yes. And the lovely Aphrodite was said to be born of the sea foam produced by his dismembered parts. So she rose from the foam and apparently was born on Cyprus, and then she moved to Cythera. And this is where she was consecrated and went forth into the Greek world and merged into the Roman world and was translated into Latin. I don't know if you've heard of, you may have heard this and come across, this was fascinating, but phosphorus means morning, and Hesperus means evening. And this is where they saw her. They thought that she was two different planets.
Oh, the morning star and the evening star.
The morning and the evening. Yep. And if you keep going and you keep translating this word, you have Hesperus meaning Vesper, which is evening, and phosphorus goes to Lucifer, which is morning. And this is where we have the verse in Isaiah, I believe, where it says, "O son of the morning star, how you have fallen from the heavens, O Lucifer." And it goes on. But this is a reference to Venus, and the early church fathers took that one time that Lucifer is mentioned in the entire biblical scriptures, the 66 books, one time, and they built a whole theology on it and a whole misrepresentation of the word Lucifer. And I'm going to leave that there for you for you to study, because you could stay on that for hours. But that's kind of like a fact.
Very interesting.
A fact, when you start breaking down language, you see the roots. So anything you have to add on that at all before I kind of hop into Western and then a little esoteric, and then I guess we'll go to the Tarot?
No, that's great. Continue.
Okay. All right. Venus is interested in the best way that I saw, and as if I could sum it up, and everything that I read about her, is this urge to merge. This magnetic force that attracts love, material possessions, but it's also a magnetic force that works within us. And if we're hard and calloused and have issues, she won't be able to work and bring, she wants to bring inner harmony, inner peace to outer transform the world. She is all about bringing beauty to the world. And so that's where we see this grace and art and eloquent speech and elegant attire and sophistication and human relationships really mattering, and looking at second house matters. I've got to bring in the third house because of esoteric astrology, putting her with Gemini and Mercury, which is exactly what we talked about earlier, tying in a more intelligent way. You know, Gemini is such a people person sign, and this is where you see this, you know, her flittering about like a butterfly. She wants to relate, but she wants to do it intellectually. You see a lot of teachers with strong Gemini.
But also on her terms, Geminis are very back and forth, up and down.
And this is the dual, and you talked about that, and I said I was going to bring that in. This is where you see the dual nature of everything, right?
Polarity.
You know, right, polarity, exactly. Male, female, dark, white, in, out, up, down. And in Gemini, it's going to spark that intellectual level where we can then use our intelligence and manage our lives for higher level understanding. So in the personality, we see it in Taurus and Libra, but in the soul level and the wisdom, we see it higher functioning in Gemini. Because this is really fascinating now. The opposite of the third house is the ninth house, which is Sagittarius Sun, which is what I opened with. She wants to move us all the way up to the ninth house so that we have a true understanding of the spiritual higher level of love. She can discriminate and illuminate and bring freedom from illusion with the strong, strong intellect. And did you know that Buddha was a Taurine? And he was a Taurus. And he taught us that all suffering comes from inappropriate desire.
Well, it makes sense if you think the Hierophant is Taurus.
Right, exactly, the teacher. It's an attachment in Taurus. It's an attachment to the world, but living in an unattached way.
Crazy.
And that's, you know, isn't that the challenge for all of us? You know, to own things, but not have things own you. You know, that kind of thing where, you know, what are you really? Are you the car you drive? Are you your house?
Don't attach the things to you.
Yeah, I mean, where's your self-worth really coming in at? Is it in your new hairdo, your new pair of shoes? You know, this is where you can have misplaced love in how you're like, God, how can somebody like get into $20,000, $30,000 of credit card debt, you know, and you see what they spent their money on. And they don't love themselves psychologically. They you know, they need to be healed. They need to be set free from the improper energetic signature print that was left. They can remove that. And if they don't, they're gonna try to find satisfaction in either food, right? A lot of overweight people you can see with Venus problems, you know, with food or with things. Hoarders. This is where you see hoarding. And, you know, what Venus wants to say is make your life beautiful, bring loveliness into your life, but you cannot forget the intellectual order. And always think of Libra and Saturn when you think of a higher octave of Venus, because that's what it is. It's Saturn coming in and saying, all right, wait a minute. You know, we need to have a little bit of boundaries, and we need to have a little bit of what is right for everyone here. You know, what's justice and fairness in the world here? Because Venus is a beneficial planet. It wants to bring benefit wherever she goes. So she has ability here in the Libra Saturnian expression is to be able to detach herself from the outcome. You know, not, again, this Buddha nature, just living a life. And that's really mindfulness. When I talk to people about mindfulness and help them not have a monkey mind, I talk about the ability to kind of pull away and do your breath work, and how that will slow all your inner systems down, including your brain waves, and how that will allow you to then see things. You know, it's creating balance and harmony within. So, you know, she really is the lady. And she's about your deepest, deepest passions. So wherever Venus is. In a man's chart, it's the kind of spouse that you desire, apparently. I have Venus. I want to talk about this for a minute. You know, you had talked about seeing, I think it was homosexuality. You had attributed that to Sagittarius. This was like way back, maybe one of our first episodes. Why do I remember that and not the other comment you said? That's crazy. But anyway, you might be able to see, you know, how Venus loves. And, you know, just to put myself out there a little bit, I have Venus conjunct my moon in the 8th house. So I'm not necessarily attracted to the female, but I could see, if I weren't with my partner, I could definitely see why that would be there. You know, I'm not living that way. I'm not a lesbian. I'm just saying I understand the attraction and I understand the pull. You know, and it's like not something that I need to be, you know, we've got Jupiter in the 9th house, I got to say this. It's not something that I need to be delivered from. There's not something wrong with me. I'm not broken. I'm just honest and saying I'm not walking in a sexual identity that I could identify with if I allowed myself, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense that Venus is female because, I mean, it seems like it's very, very, very common for a woman to be bisexual or have had, you know, an experience with another girl. And it is so much more rare for you know, males to be bisexual. So, yeah, you're not the only one who could see, you know, even most girls can see, you know, the attraction of the feminine principle. I mean, to me, there are very few women who I've met who are like, no, zero attraction to women. It's only like a handful.
Yeah, see, that's something I wouldn't know anything about, right? You know, I just have seen it in other people that I know. You know, I know their identification, and you know, I'm like, wow, yeah, that shows up in your chart. You know, and they're like, really? I'm like, yeah. I mean, did you have a propensity for it? Now, you have to remember the stars impel; they don't compel. What does that mean? That means that there's energies out there. Just like right now, there's probably a YouTube video that can show me how to change my oil in the car. But I'm not going to be able to do that and actually put momentum behind it until I study the video, learn how to do it, and get off my butt and go out and actually do it. So knowledge isn't enough, and I actually have that written down here towards the end on this piece that, you know, it's not just about earthly knowledge here, even though we have it very centrally in Taurus. Remember, we want to move up from Gemini up to that 9th house, and it's about... Oh boy, I forgot where I was going with that. But it's not an earthly knowledge. It's not just. It should be, definitely. It's got its place, and thank God, because I love making things beautiful. Like when I do a tarot spread, you know, you've seen those, and I set the table up. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it takes me to prepare for a tarot reading that I then video record for my clients. It takes me an hour just to set things up because I meditate and I ask what stones, what flowers or herbs or colors or, you know, because it all flows together. But that's that Venus conjunct my moon, right?
Let me make this clear. You people don't fucking understand. Kate's readings are special. If we lived like 2,000 years ago, she would be a famous person like the Oracle at Delphi. Track her down, find her readings pages, buy readings from her. It is worth way more than any money you could ever give her.
Oh, that's really sweet. I really am gifted to do it, and I enjoy it. You know, and what's fun about it, like the way you read too, right back at you, you know, if you want the feminine aspect of a reader, from a masculine perspective and really wanting you to balance, not being afraid to talk about that. And men, just balance your energies, because we have both inside of us. That's another thing we need to talk about. I know we have in the past, but in relation to Venus, you're excellent at that. I mean, every reading that you've sent me, and I'm really grateful to be able to just hit you up and be like, hey, would you read on this for me? Cause,
I feel like my readings to you are trash because it's like 2 paragraphs, and then I ask you for a 1-card reading, and you're like, okay, here's an hour video. And I'm like, well.
But that's the difference in our giftings and our callings and our Venuses, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got this really analytical Venus. Or you're in Virgo,
Yeah.
And you're going to communicate. Isn't it in the 3rd house, too? I think you're Virgo.
With Mercury and Virgo.
Yeah, I'm getting to memorize your chart. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it really matches your expression, doesn't it? In the way that you you feel that. But, it's also your Mercury's trining Uranus and Neptune, so we could go on forever and talk about that. No, you have Regulus also conjunct your Scorpio Venus. You have a Virgo Venus, excuse me.
Yeah.
So your wisdom there and your balancing of those energies is something that you're going to be able to talk about and renowned for, actually. Like what I just talked about, the way that you do readings, my God, there it is. You bring out that other side of it. Leo is Regulus's star, and this is the fire and the passion, but we'll stop there. But yeah, you've got it in a more fastidious 6th house swing kind of way. Virgo lives over in the 6th, wanting that day-to-day Venus to make sense and to be practical. Like, how do you feel Venus operating in your life? Because I know that it's progressed. It's progressed into Scorpio, but...
Well, I mean, it's hard to answer that without getting too personal.
I suppose that's true. It's relationships, isn't it? That's kind of a loaded question, wasn't it? Yeah, well, see, I can talk about it because I don't give a shit.
Or you're, like, married and shit.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm very happily married, so I'm very grateful for that, But it's because, check this out. Let me just say this, because we need to have a podcast on this sometime, like how do signs fit together. I'm a Cancer sun, Scorpio sun, and he's a Scorpio sun, Scorpio sun. So we're all water in this house.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's crazy. We're flowing, but he's double fixed. So just think about that for a minute. That gets challenging. But this well-developed mind and thought process, this is something I want to wrap up with here, cannot be accomplished. You can't use that higher level intellect to really spur you away from the flesh, so to speak, and just being all wrapped up in yourself about something to do with Venus issues, relationships especially, things. If you have not healed your own, self-love issues or how you were loved as a child and, all of this. And I tell you, this is some transparency where I had huge issues with this, you guys, because of my abusive past. It was very difficult for me. I had all these triggers, and until I became an adult and began to really work through them, I was not able to love and receive love. That's another one. When Venus is debilitated, she can't receive love. She doesn't feel worthy enough. She feels ugly. Can you imagine Venus feeling ugly? I mean, that makes no sense.
I
right?
can. It makes perfect sense to me. There's so many.
Sad.
Just because it makes me sad too. But I've met so many beautiful women that are like, I'm ugly.
Oh man, we
so
need to
to
talk
me
about
that makes.
that.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Well, and
not sense in the right way, but not sense because it makes sense to me, but it makes sense because I've seen it before.
Yeah. Well, Venus is so subjective too, because Everybody
Right.
sees their Venus through their own lens, and their lens is based on how they were raised. This is my opinion. How they were raised, their culture, that's important. What kind of culture were they raised in? Not just their home, their culture, their extended family, were they present, and was there any abuse? And if, all of those were challenging, then you're going to have an adult that has got misplaced Venus. We see a lot of porn actors with debilitated Venuses. Just saying. Go look at, you can study this like I do. I sit for hours looking at charts.
You're saying that porn actresses don't do well after porn? What? Who would have thought?
Not only that, they come across like they're so happy, and everything's normal, but they have some of the highest suicide rates and things like this, and so often a debilitated Venus will act out in inappropriate ways, and justify as well, because you've got the intellect either working higher or lower. So that's all I got, I think, except for one thing. I wanted to read Esoteric. I thought this was pretty profound. This is out of Soul-Centered Astrology, Key to Expanding Yourself, Alan Oken. So this is not my information. And this is where Esoteric Astrology works on the soul-centered way. Like, it's more to do with your personal incarnation and why you're here. Not just that you're here, like your personality, how you work, how you're wired, which is equally important. I think when I was listening to a podcast the other day, talked about allowing, I know we're talking about esoteric things, and that's the theme of the podcast, but we're also evolving the newness, and we're allowing, and we want, you and I both, I think, things to evolve, and I think that has to do with bringing out the old that's been covered up so that can be reintroduced into astrology, because not a lot of people know esoteric astrology. So it's not like you throw it all out, you integrate them together. A good podcast would be, what's the difference between Western and esoteric? And it also introduces the 7 rays. Are you familiar with the 7 rays?
The 7 colors?
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's 7 colors, right? 7 chakras, 7 days to a week, all that stuff.
Yep.
The 7 rays correspond to the signs in the planets. So you have ray 1, which is willpower, ray 2, love and wisdom, ray 3, active intelligence, and it goes on. And these rays apparently were energetic signature footprints that we came in with, and it's how we're to manifest our energetic symbol now through this ray. And you find that in going into your blueprint and your star map, and I think you need to look at Western and esoteric meanings and combine them together, because I have seen too much straight Western astrology just be absolutely pristinely on point, and you can't make this stuff up. You know what I mean? Like, there's patterns where it's consistently on point, especially in my own life. So again, I think we have to be open, and we have to bring in what we've lost and what's been snuffed out, and say, no longer are we going to let you hide this information. We're going to bring it out, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to teach it, and then we'll begin to see health different too. I'm studying for naturopathic psychology doctorate, and a lot of the way that I see healing and health is to look at the whole person, and that's got to include looking at your astrology. And when's the last time you've gone to a medical doctor and they've pulled up your natal chart, looked at your transits, and then medically, intuitively treated you?
Not unless you're like going to a Chinese traditional doctor or something like that. And
That's correct.
I'd be surprised if even they did that. I would
No,
think
they
everyone
do.
would do that.
It's an art. They do, and they're trained to do it, and it's part of their training. It's like part of it. It's like you have to
Well,
know it. It's fascinating.
there is a tradition of it in the West, actually. Hermetic herbalism, alchemy, essentially plant alchemy. They
Hmm.
did use assigned all the body parts to each planets and all the herbs to planets, and treat accordingly.
Right. That's also in this book. They break all that down, like what is everything assigned to, and it goes all the way down. And they assign it though, like the rays. So just an example here. I don't know if you hear that in the background, but that's my puppy dreaming, and she's making noises. Let me wake her up. Bella. The active intelligence, which is Ray 3, and the signs are Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And the planets are Saturn and Earth, and the kingdom is the animal kingdom. And it goes on with the chakra, the gland, the sensing, the food, the politics, the stones, the shape, the plane, and the colors. I mean, it breaks this down so deeply. And as I was studying I'm Ray 3, I came in with the active intelligence ray, which makes sense with my 9th sun. What I like to talk about things like this. And as you start digging into this stuff, you're like, that's why I like that color, or that's why I don't like that, or things that you wonder, like,
Right.
I wonder why I like chocolate over vanilla. Like, what makes that in a person?
Tons of things. Like I found before I knew anything about occultism or magic. My favorite herb was incense, was sandalwood, and my favorite alcohol was mead and apple cider. And then later, and I get into all that, I find out about Babylon, and have her symbol tattooed on me. Her favorite incense, sandalwood, also happens to be a moon incense, and she's the divine feminine and all that. One of her favorite offerings, mead.
Oh, that's crazy, right? See, and didn't you just be like, what? That's where you sit back.
Yeah, that's what it makes me think. Like maybe she was always there, and it also helps me realize that these are all archetypes. These are all different lenses on energy. Now, as I learn more and more about different gods and goddesses, I see, the energy of different gods and goddesses in different people, because they're all just flavors of energy, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the archetypes, when they show up repeatedly, we can begin to rely on them. And a feminine archetype of Venus would be mother, nurse, prostitute, stripper, porn actress, model. People who have Venus in the first house often are models. It's kind of a glam factor. Along with Scorpio, they tend to be beautiful people. Thank you very much. I have Venus in my house of Scorpio. They have this charm to them, man, when Venus is really special in a chart. But let me read this from the book. And this is the function of Venus from Esoteric Astrology. The predominant concept which we hold as love, especially that aspect of love which is romanticized, exalted in song and poetry, searched for to the ends of the earth, and generally thought of as the quintessential sharing between human beings, would hardly be thought of as being logical in nature. Yet the essential quality of consciousness, the primary emanation of divinity on the plane of causality, and its incarnation in humankind, is a pure expression of the universal mind. On the soul level, Venus is the vehicle for this emergence of this love, principle of life through the focused will of the mind of God. So again, you know how this ties into Gemini being the intellect And once Gemini gets to that higher intellect, the opposite is the ninth house, known as the house of God, the guru, the house of religion, the house of higher education, long distance travels, the spiritual house in many ways. It is the spiritual aspect of Venus which reveals the Son of God, Venus exalted in Pisces, as the Son of Mind, perfected, the initiate. It is this consecrated human being who is the instrument of God's love. And that's where we see it in the seventh house, where it's expressing itself in relatedness. It's an instrument of God's love, so to speak. It's able to function as the archetype of the healer and the nurse and the nurturer and the lover and the vixen and all of that. And Venus functions to turn knowledge into wisdom. It harmoniously links the lower and the higher mental faculties through the rhythm of relatedness embodied in its sign Gemini. Its focus in the human organism is through Anja Center, the third eye, the eye of the bull, the horn of the unicorn, etc. This is the seat of wisdom and the lens through which the more highly developed human being perceives the world. So it's trying to bring you to this higher way of seeing things, and we know we need the third eye to do that, right? So Venus ushers in the absolute full spectrum of the beauty of love in all of the areas that it envelops. This is the seat of wisdom and the lens through which the more highly developed human mind perceives the world. Venus is thus the focus of synthesis, the resolution of polarity, that is the right and left eyes, and the blending quality which aids in the resolution of duality. It is the energy of Venus which promotes diplomacy and establishes the right human relations between all people, between great nations. Venus's great potency lies in its ability to bring about harmonious relationships within pairs of opposites, thus furthering creative manifestation on all levels. This may be compared to the function of Mercury, which awakens consciousness by relating opposites, but does not harmonize or blend them. See, Mercury can't do that. It can only bring about, here's what you need to do. But it's Venus that takes it and moves it out and activates it. And look at the Empress, right? I mean,
you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of when it's usually an interaction between women and men, where a woman will come to a man, like her boyfriend, with some problems, and be like, all right, you could do this, this, and this. And she's like, I don't want you to tell me what to do. I just want you to hear me out and be there for me. Like, she's not looking for the intellectual solution. You know, you need to meet her on the emotional level.
Oh, man. That is very, very powerful. But, as you know, that's challenging for the masculine, because the masculine isn't wired. It's the sun. It's Yang, Aries, first house, moving out, perpetual cardinal energy that wants to just go, go, go. Kind of like Mars too, but it's the very ego. So again, if that's all off-centered, that's not going to work. All right, are we ready to talk about the tarot, or did you have anything you wanted to add?
No. What's it called? I still have the bearded Venus stuff after your stuff.
Okay, great. I want to hear that. All right, well, I wanted to talk about the tarot because I think it's important. Just such a great resource of knowledge for personal development there. It's just incredible. Of course, depending on the deck, right? But she's number 3, the Empress. So, of course, she's what's considered a major arcana, and there's 22. major arcana cards. And the major arcana cards, again, are those big themes and the big concepts, the broader topics, and they have to do with love, death, change, the self, life journeys, intuition, authority, rebirth, the greater, bigger, transformative things that we go through in life. And they're also very important universal spiritual truths that were hidden within the tarot. And on a typical tarot card, there are many, many, many layers. So it's important to see, I think, all of those layers. The Empress, of course, is Venus, in representing the second and the fourth chakra, and the number 3. And this is Venus on Earth. This is Earth energy in Venus, number 3, according to the tarot. I know fire, I get it, but for Venus, it's considered Earth energy in the Smith weight, and I bet it's not in some of the decks that you've talked about. Or the Thoth, is that what you use? No, you use Aleister.
Yeah, well, okay. That is the same, but in the Kabbalah, NETZACH, the sphere Venus is in, is also attributed to fire.
Okay, yep. Well, this is matters of the earth when we get to Earth. And, this is where we see pentacles as well. So a lot of Taurus energy in here too, matters of the earth. And I would add air in there for sure. And you have to add fire because you just do. It's passion, right?
Yeah.
In the tarot card, she does have a crown on her head with many stars. I believe there's 18 stars. Whenever we see crowns, that always represents the relationship with the divine and an intersection of consciousness and spirituality. I thought that was fascinating. Consciousness and spirituality. How many times have we talked about the lower and the higher nature of Venus? You've got the conscious understanding of Venus. This is Earth, Taurus energy. Then you have the spiritual understanding of Venus, which is that higher octave that we're trying to get to upon the earth. Symbolism in there as well as a star, and the stars are on top of her head, and this is hopes and wishes, and one of the biggest things stars represent is illumination. So the Empress is the divine feminine herself. And it's nurturing. And creativity is really, really, really huge with Venus. Super huge. I just got to share, I have a very, conjunct the moon there, conjunct Rahu, conjunct the sun, conjunct Vulcan, Mercury, Regulus, 2 other asteroids, Uranus, Pluto, and Mars. I have all of these in a row. They're all connected together. And my Venus was really subdued when I was not in it was very earthy. It was very Taurus, awakening. And, that'd be a great podcast too, right? To talk about our journeys and how we see, spirituality and awakenings and things. But once I had that, I got to tell you, she led me into some of the most creative things that I never would have imagined coming out of me because I was a banker, Oh, yeah. I was a financial advisor. I was in Wall Street, man. I was building things on the earth like Taurus. It was all pummeled down into earth and my relationships. I mean, I'm a Cancer mom, so you love your babies. But, wow, when I began to have my North Node shift, which is in the 9th house in Cancer, away from the hard Capricornian 3rd house of Gemini, when my intellect began to be moved into higher levels and higher ways, which is where it's positioned in my chart to be, I began to subsequently get very psychic and very creative. Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting. It's interesting you mentioned psychic because I'm looking at the Empress Tarot card from the Thoth deck, and there are 2 moons on it.
Interesting. Yeah, Venus is on this card for Smith-Waite.
Venus is attributed to the Empress in the Thoth Tarot, but there are 2 moons on it. I'm not exactly sure why.
Do you have the booklet that comes with the, maybe he explains it in the booklet?
Well, Crowley's quote-unquote booklet, Book of Thoth, is indecipherable. Like I said, he speaks in riddles. He speaks over everyone's head. You really have to be a scholar to understand that book. But I have Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot from Juan Milo Duquette, where anyone can understand it.
Understanding Aleister Crowley for Dummies.
Yeah, basically, that's what it is.
Not calling you a dummy on any measure, because I don't
I
call
get what
people names.
But that's what it is. So anyone can understand it. Like the first
funny.
90 pages of it is just background. It's like a crash course in Hermeticism and some specific Crowley stuff. You have to read at least 90 pages of background information before he even talks about one single card, like specifically.
Well, and that's interesting, because we talked about tonight, before we got started, we always just kind of say, okay, what's this going to look like? How's this flow going to go? And I talked about, you talked about going into the Kabbalah, and then I said, maybe do a little background. You said, I did that last week. And I thought about it for a second, obviously, for answering. It was like, he did. It's a layered structure is where I'm going with this. Like, in order to understand some of the things we're saying, you had to have read certain books or read certain information or have a certain knowledge base already. So hopefully, if you don't know some of the things we're talking about, it will spur you on to want to know, right?
Yep. Gotta do your own research.
Right? You and don't listen to us. Don't take our words for it. Do your own research, but hopefully it'll spark an interest. Also, excuse me, hit my mic. Also on that card is the symbol of wheat, and that's fertility and abundance whenever we see wheat. And it also represents Demeter, the goddess of harvest in Greek mythology, right?
Yeah.
Pomegranates are all over her dress as she's pregnant, and it's flowing, and she's outside, and we know that is definitely and sexuality and abundance, because it's on the Empress card, number 2. It's the veil that's up behind her, the veil of pomegranates behind her is the water, and then there's the veil between the 2 pillars. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about the number 3, though, and the other cards that really, well, let me do this first, because let's talk about the negative expression, and then we'll go into the other 3s, because this is where you see it. So we get Empress. I think we have a pretty good understanding, and when she comes forth, it's issues of creativity, and depending on where she is in your spread and what else is there and what you asked is how she'll respond to that, correct?
Correct.
When she is reversed, which would be an upside-down signature, which I'm excited I'm finally starting to read after 4 years of reading Tarot, I'm finally ready to use reversals. Took me a while. I really wanted to get that upright meaning, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, reversed. This is what we're seeing. Venus and Scorpio can be like this. This is a smothering type of energy where it's very possessive and very jealous and very burnt out, because the energy is like falling out of you in ways that it shouldn't. And it's blocking your creativity because you're not allowing flow at all. It's just all kind of just blah, being poured out. And, it also can be too much abundance. We can have too much, which will lead to gout. It's known as the rich man's disease, right? And it can be so much stuff that, what do we talk about? Hoarding, right? This is where there's too many things around you, too many things that you love, too much clutter where you can't even breathe. An overindulgence kind of energy in everything. And it's a good reminder when you see this reversed that we must treat ourselves well. We must treat ourselves well. We must have the harmonic balance of the 7th house. We must allow Venus to bring out that harmonic archetype of Libra, and to know that wherever Venus is, she wants to be beneficial. And if your love isn't a beneficial thing, if you're not feeling loved, if you know you're stifled in your love, if you've got challenges with loving people and relationships, get a Venus reading. You know, really sit down and understand what's going on with your Venus and how you can use these outer energies that are moving and constantly moving and flowing to work for your good. And it can also be, this is really good if you're doing a love reading and she's reversed, it can mean that you're giving too much of yourself away and you're not taking care of yourself because the baby isn't coming out the normal channel, right? It's upside down and the baby's coming, it's just not a good situation. You do not want the Empress reversed. She's not a pleasant situation when she's reversed. So with the Empress, we have the related cards of the threes in the four suits, right? And here is where you can really start to see.
Well, in the four suits, actually, I don't know if it's a Raider White, but in, what's it called? Since NETZACH is the seventh sphere in the Kabbalah, you know, the Kabbalistic view is that Venus, you know, it corresponds to the seventh NETZACH. And I was just thinking before, the Seven of Cups is Venus and Scorpio. That's the overindulgence energy we're talking about.
That's interesting. That's really, well, 7, it has to do with Libra. It's the 7th house.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And when you're looking at the Three of Swords, for instance, that did not want to come out of my mouth. The Three of Swords you've got is one of the most feared cards in the deck.
One of my birth cards.
It is loss, sorrow. We see it as betrayal. But it's also necessary sacrifice. Remember, it's a double-edged blue sword.
And that one's
and
Saturn.
People miss that. Yeah, people really miss that. That it's Libra and Saturn. That's this boundaries. Boundaries and relationships that we were alluding to, right? That's exactly what the Three of Swords is. And go ahead.
It's also about learning from your suffering. You know, it's not suffering for no reason. You know, the ones, the twos, and the threes, you know, they're all supposed to be positive cards, including all of the threes. The Three of Swords is kind of the one negative one, but it's negative right now. It's
right.
In the future, it's positive. It's about, you know, the growth from the sorrow.
That's exactly true. That you're making room for further growth and maturity. That's the way I see the Three of Swords. That, you know, optimistic when we're in pain, but it's a strong motivator for change, right? Pain? Oh my goodness, I can't even tell you. My misplaced Venus has caused concerns in my life over the years in the way that I related to people. There is no doubt about it. And I had to go back, and I've since done it, you know, but a while ago, and just, you know, professionally even, just be like, you know, I probably shouldn't have talked to you that way. Again, you know, operating out of these triggers that aren't healed in love and relating, it can be really, really challenging, but you don't have to suffer. I want to share with you the power of the mind. It's incredible. The brain is malleable. It is not frozen. It is not set. It can be changed, transformed, mutated, integrated, and supercharged. We've just not been given the wisdom until recently, and it's starting to explode about the power of the mind and law of mentality, you know, the mental plane. And how it's the way that we do it, though. There's other things that go with it, and that's the piece that's left out of it, because you can't think yourself out of something if you don't allow the mind to have the right brain waves of letting go, because it won't release. When your brain is in beta mode, really high wave brain patterns, it's difficult for you to release. You're in the doing mode. You have to slow that mind down to heal it, to bring it to a place of release. a place where it's willing not to think so hard like Mercury and get out of the intellect and start moving more into the higher levels of Neptune, which we don't want to go to because it's scary there. What else did I want to look at? The Three of Pentacles is an interesting card. And we have this card, and it's Capricorn and Mars. You know, and you're like, well, where's Venus in that? It's relating. It's relating. It's two people coming to meet a third person and wanting to exchange. You know, I read somewhere today, too, where Venus is tied heavily into exchange. You know, we know this from what we talked about with Seventh House, but like physical exchange.
Before about the exchange of energies and all that.
Yeah,
started out.
Exactly. And she wants to do it in an earthy way in Taurus, you know, like you take your blueprints to someone and they make a beautiful house. You know, that would be a great example of the Three of Pentacles. And so when that card shows up, the Three of Pentacles, it's time to start thinking about maybe putting some practical things into motion, starting to move them out. You were talking how it's a growth cycle when we're at these numbers. You know, we're not yet at the 10. We're going towards the major arcana cards.
I'm sorry, you cut out for a second.
I said you were talking about the 2s and the 3s and the 1s, the 2s and the 3s, how they're numbers that are numbers moving us to maturity and growth, and that they're the lesson numbers, you know, where we're relating and trying to figure things out as we move forward.
Well, the idea is the 1s and the 2s and the 3 represent Kether, Chakma, and Bina, who are above the abyss in the, I believe it's the causal realm, but the idea is they're essentially perfect energies. Kether and Chakma have no vice, and Bina does, but she's the Great Mother, and she's still above the abyss. So they're meant to be relatively perfect energy. Not perfect, but there's really not a lot of downsides in any of the 1s, the 2s, or the 3s, because they're above the abyss in the, I want to say causal, but I'm probably wrong on that, causal realm, because there's titles to the different realms.
Well, when you think about it, we talked about, remember we talked about Cancer and how it isn't really a thing until the 4th house. I brought that up where it's like, you know, it's interesting. You've got the first house of Aries, fire, second house of Earth, third house air, fire,
now,
Earth.
that's really good because the 4th sphere, Chesed, is the first sphere that's below the abyss, and the path that connects from the 3rd sphere, Bina, to the 4th sphere, Chakma, is the path of the Chariot, the card of Cancer.
Right, she's the gate in, basically, the psychic gate in, like she's the connection in, known as a sign to do that, to connect everything together because she's the mother of the home, like she's able to birth something there.
Interesting, yep.
So the 3 of Cups, that's one of my favorite cards, and that is Cancer and Mercury. But it has that Venetian feel, doesn't it? The 3 of Cups.
Well, the cups are water, emotions, so yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And Cancer and Mercury is just, that's a powerful combination. Anyone who has their Mercury in Cancer, that is a very, very, very powerful combination. Again, this is thus we see 3 women raising their cups, their chalices, and they're cheering. And what that is something has been created, and they're celebrating, and there's so much bounty around them. It's one of my favorite cards, but I love women in general, the divine feminine, and you know, something could be said here too for Clarissa Pinkola Estes' books, Women Who Run with the Wolves. Highly recommend women reading that book. I'm working my way through it when I can deliciously sit down and just sit with this book. It's got, the lessons are phenomenal. It's traditional stories and folklore about the wild woman archetype, basically, and how we're seeing the feminine come back alive, and with the introduction of the feminine asteroids that came into astrology, you know, symbolically right along the same time as feminism movement started to grow in the Western world. Thus, culturally, they grew as well. So we see how all of this ties in together, and I don't know why I went down that road, but yeah. I know we had talked about that before, just the collective asteroid influence and this coming in. Oh, I was just talking about the feminine wanting to balance herself. Like she was suppressed, and to say that the feminine wasn't suppressed, I don't know how anybody can justify themselves and say that. And I'm not one of those staunch militant feminists who, you know, if they can do what they want, I'm not going to judge them. But I think you can catch more flies with honey, and you can't shake hands with a clenched fist.
The definition of feminism used to be, you know, equal rights.
I'm sorry, let me just say that. You can't shake hands with a clenched fist. That's Indira Gandhi. I did not create that. But it's something I try to live by. Go ahead. Nice. I apologize. Say what you were saying.
Well, I said what I was saying.
Oh, but I didn't hear you. I talked over you. I'm sorry.
What the fuck was I saying?
We were talking about the feminine in Venus trying to balance itself because of the suppression. You know, I think what happened is the feminine was so suppressed, she came out in full force in rebellion, like really strong, and she had to get out of where she was and push her way out of that mud that she'd been encased in, so to speak, to have a voice that can sit at the table with the masculine and be heard and not be laughed at is taking a really long time. So that's kind of what we were talking about.
Paul, I don't remember what I said. It was just one thing. It wasn't a big deal.
All right. Well, I'm going to read this real quick, and then I'm pretty much done. Be curious to hear anything you have to say about the tarot. But this is under Tarot and Astrology. Enhance your readings with the wisdom of the zodiac. Corinne Kenner. Highly recommend this book if you're into astrology and tarot, because it brings in other layers and some things that I missed. But a couple paragraphs, she says, in the Empress card, Venus takes human form, and one of the cosmos' most heavenly bodies finds an outlet for her creative nature. The Empress is an archetypical mother who constantly generates new life. Perpetually pregnant, she's a symbol of fertility and growth. Like Mother Nature, she's usually pictured in a lush garden setting. She sits comfortably on a cushioned throne, in keeping with her craving for stability and comfort, and she wears a crown of 12 stars, one for every month of the year and every sign of the zodiac. Both Venus and the Empress share a love of beauty, and love and attraction are powerful forces for creation. See, we have to remember it's not one or the other, it's a mixture. And man, like you were talking about, if you can get a woman, a feminine who is intellectual and beautiful, I mean, that's a hard combination to not want. Right?
In all levels of consciousness.
I mean, it's supposed to be that way. That's why, you know, a lot of women really, let's talk about this for a minute, you know, have a hard time with their husbands maybe noticing other women. And it's like, that is just so going to happen. Like, it's impossible. You know, men are wired to visually see that feminine the way that they do. Now, what they do with it and how they work that energy is a whole nother story, right? But
of course,
it's part of the magnetism, unless you are, of course, inside of you, the masculine is stronger, and then you are a homosexual. I mean, this is the way this works, and it's seen in the chart. And there's nothing wrong or right about any of that. It's you are who you are, and you can't deny who you are. In ancient Rome, Venus was the goddess of beauty, love, and attraction, and in Greece she was known as Aphrodite. And we really didn't talk a lot about Aphrodite, but there's a long history of her. She's other names depending on the culture. Have you come across this at all? Aphrodite showing up in other names, like in Hindu and Hindu tradition.
We're going to get into Ishtar in a little bit.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's many other types of Venus archetypes is what I'm saying. There's many. It's not just one. She shows up in all over the world. I mean, everywhere. The Empress, of course, is married. She's a loving partner to the Emperor. I don't know why she said it that way. I'm like, of course. Well, the reason we know, of course, the way she said that, I guess, is because we know the Empress and the Emperor go together. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Okay. Some people don't know that. They're just like, oh, okay. But they are a couple. So Venus graces everything she touches with ease, comfort, affection, and enjoyment. She is generous to a fault. So women who have unbalanced Venuses, who've had sexual trauma that they've not been healed from, or had a really dysfunctional home and a father-daughter dynamic, chances are your Venus is debilitated and you're struggling. If you've not dealt with the dysfunction, it can really come out through that planet in a very detrimental way. I've just seen it. Just too overgiving. Pouring yourself out, again, reversed, right? Just giving it all away and not leaving anything for yourself. This is where you can see mothers spoiling children. Have you ever seen this? We've all seen this, I think. Where the child wants, and she doesn't know how to say no because she equates things to security. And she thinks that if her child has things, he'll feel secure. See how that works?
Or just doesn't want to be mean, wants to always be loving.
But too much of a good thing isn't good. We have to have 7th house boundaries to move us to the 9th house higher way of seeing things. So she's going to rule pleasure and enjoyment as well as love of beauty and the arts. She is sensual, romantic, gracious and kind, gentle and sympathetic. In keeping her role as the morning and evening stars, Venus rules 2 signs, Taurus and Libra. She also rules the corresponding 2nd house of treasures and possessions, as well as the 7th house of marriage, partnerships, and personal relationships. So that's all I have. I will hand it back over to you. But fascinating, the depth in the Empress card, what you find there. It's really, if you're struggling with love, meditate on her. Set her out. Put her up around the house. Think about her. Put her in your pocket. Meditate on her ways.
She's nice.
Yeah, she'll find ways, too. She'll find ways. And you know what's been really nice is seeing Venus expressed in other people towards me. And that has been it's really been a thing of beauty, because a lot of my relationships, I was in that financial sector for so long. They were all tied in to also where I lived, which was in the city. So, it was a big shift and a big change to come out to the country and reduce and all that stuff. And consequently, my Venetian relating changed, if that makes sense. And it's been nice. And I think you know what I mean by that. When you see Venus, like you talked about a woman doing things in the home, when you see Venus show up, it's a thing of beauty. And last thing is the love that my husband has shown me and the acceptance. We've been together 17 years. Has been, that love has transformed my life. It's transformed my life. It's been something that he's been a friend to me when I've needed him to be, and his Venus is very solid. So I'm very fortunate in that way. And with that, I will hand it over to you.
So the last part I have here is about the bearded Venus. And I was trying to find the quote where I first heard of this. I was pretty sure it was in the mystical Kabbalah somewhere, but I couldn't find it. So I did a quick Google search, and the sources on this are very limited. We'll start with where my rabbit hole started, with just a Wikipedia page. Venus barbata, bearded Venus, was an epithet of the goddess Venus among the Romans, and that is a quote from Servius, who is a historian. He's considered like the smartest man of his time, a well-respected scholar.
Okay.
And this next part, Macrobius also mentions a statue of Venus in Cyprus, and Macrobius mentions this according to Servius. Is the quote of Macrobius saying this comes from a book called Saturnalia, which Servius wrote, but it's supposed to be a documentation of a conversation between a group of himself and a few other wise men that happened on the holiday of Saturnalia. So although another man is said to have said this, it kind of still comes from Servius.
Mm-hmm.
So Macrobius also mentions a statue of Venus in Cyprus, representing the goddess with a beard in female attire, but representing in her whole figure that of a man. See also Aphrodite. The idea of Venus being a mixture of the male and female nature seems to belong to a very late period of antiquity, and that is sourced to Voss, Mythal, and there was one other source in Hargrave. And it's interesting because, and it continues on a little bit, Venus, it has the Latin masculine ending. The US is a masculine ending, like the O in Spanish. And it's also interesting that we talked about fire being attributed to Venus and NETZACH because, fire is a masculine element.
Yeah. I'm looking through my notes here because I know that I wrote down somewhere I came across Venus being male as an archetype in other antiquity, like you're talking about, where it's showing up male. And what was one of them? Golly, was it Apollo? I don't know. There was a popular one. I can't remember, but I didn't go down that road because there was so much to cover. So it's interesting that you're bringing this out. But yeah. So is this like a male personification?
Well, I figured out where this originally came from. And the idea of a bearded Venus. So I was doing some more digging on a bearded Venus, and one of the only other sources I could find is a 30-page article in a French archaeology paper called Revue Archaeology from 1911. And in it, this guy, he tries to make an argument that the whole masculine Venus thing is silly and stupid, but he presents some really good sources and then tries to debate them, and in my opinion, his arguments are pretty shitty. So, this whole article is centered on the idea that the fact that there's this one hymn to Ishtar that mentions Ishtar having a beard like the god Ashur, who is the sun god, the Sumerian sun god. And so he tries to trace down what is this thing about Ishtar? You know, who's the Assyrian Venus? Well, associated with Venus, because the Assyrian name for Venus was Dilbat, as we're going to get into.
Yeah.
And he tracks it down to several astrological texts. And just to give you an example of what I mean by an astrological text, there are passages like, if Venus is dark in the month of Nisan, the produce of the land will not flourish in that year, or prices will be lowered. You know, it's practical things like that.
Yeah.
Here's another statement from it. If Venus in the first month has a beard, the men of the country will beget males, or within that year prices will be lowered. And it continues, this paper. I'm reading from the paper now. It is evident that this expression, Venus has a beard, refers to some phenomenon connected with the appearance of the planet. In order, however, to remove all doubt as the meaning of the phrase, the scribe has been careful enough to add an explanatory comment as follows. And it displays some Sumerian text, and it says, and it translates, it says, the phrase Zikna Zaknu, the term Ziknu, beard, means to shine, and the entire phrase, therefore, she shines strongly.
Yeah.
And this is very interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's wrong about that. I think this is kind of how it started, and the myth kind of continues from that. So I'll continue on, just more from this article. The same expression occurs again in an astrological text dealing with the planet Dilbat, which is what they called Venus, and in connection with other phrases descriptive of the appearance of the planet. In this case, various explanations are given by the commentator. Venus has a beard, we are told, refers to A, stars at her side, or B, stars in front of her. And the phrase is furthermore explained as meaning that she is thereby darkened and faint. According to this explanation, the picture of a beard is suggested by the blurred appearance of the edges. And to me, right away, I thought, like, because Venus is all about, you know, dissolving the boundaries, becoming one, sex becoming one with your partner. So that's what that made me think of right away.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And it also mentions, if we continue, in the following line, the phrase is again found, and the omen that Venus stands in the constellation Sagittarius and has a beard is explained by the planet being darkened but brilliant. Evidently, in this case, also the stars about Venus obscure her appearance to a certain extent, but nevertheless she shows a strong light. So it's interesting. So it goes on, it gets more about she has a beard like the god Ashur. It gets more into that a little more. I couldn't copy and paste from this because it's like a picture, so I gotta find the thing. Okay, returning now to the line in the hymn to Ishtar with which we started out, it is clear that the phrase there used is directly dependent upon its application to astrological text. Ashur is a solar deity whose rays are often pictured in mythology as the flowing locks of a hero. The line, therefore, is intended to compare the brilliancy of Ishtar with the brilliancy of the sun, and the poet expresses this by using an old phrase familiar to him from its occurrence in the description of the planet that was identified and associated with Ishtar. When, therefore, he says that Ishtar has a beard like Ashur, he wishes merely to convey the idea that she is as radiant as the sun himself. This is very interesting, though, because as we know from the sun episode, the sun is a masculine force.
Right.
And even though in the first quote, when it was talking about if Venus has a beard, it did say more males will be born. So it is about the appearance, but there is a connection to masculinity at the same time.
I see that. Yeah, that's interesting. You know, and in the Rider-Waite or Smith-Waite deck, the stars are on top of her head, almost like a crown.
Yeah, 'cause she
not a
often
beard.
has stars around her.
Yeah, not a beard, not below, but above her, as if, I don't know, the nature's been
Well,
brought
the
to the
idea,
highest.
well, right, there were three ideas of the beard. I'm sorry, I just totally cut you off. I feel
No,
shitty.
no, I'm good. I'm good. I was done. I'm good.
Ah, but yeah, there's ideas of the beard. Her beard is like her rays shining from her, like the rays of the sun.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I
it's
got you.
interesting. We have this other quote from this ancient Assyrian astrological text. Remember again, Dilbat is Venus. A female star is Dilbat standing at sunset. A male star is Dilbat standing at sunrise. And that kind of made sense to me because I thought sunrise, I thought Aries, kicking off the day, the first of the zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
I thought
Mm-hmm.
sunset, the darkness, Kabbalistically, the feminine is the more dark, chaotic, destructive force.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And he continues, his argument is the reference in both cases, it will be observed, is to the planet and not to the goddess. And the use of the feminine form, zikarat, i.e., she is male, is a sufficient hint that the terms male and female are used in a metaphorical sense and not to be taken literally. And what I think this guy misses completely is that none of this is meant to be taken literally. Like, when we're talking about gods and goddesses and stars having attributes, like, it's not talking about a goddess on Earth who has a heartbeat. Like, literally everything we're talking about is a metaphor when we're talking about a god and a goddess.
Correct. This is correct. And the energetic, archetypical footprint that's been attached to it through the ever-evolving history of humanity.
Right, and as we
not
talked about,
just from... Go ahead.
as you build the thought forms of Hod around the symbols
Right.
of the energy, it influences what it turns out to be.
Right. And not just from America's sense, but from a universal sense. Obviously we've left out so much. How much can we fit in? We're just trying to spark interest in these topics. This has gone pretty long, though, this one, because there's a lot to be said. But, when she shows up, were you done with that? I don't know. If you wanted to add some more, you go for it.
No, I have a little more from the article, but you can finish your point.
Well, no, I want to talk after. It's kind of a different way to go, so I'd rather wait till you finish that whole point.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Well, I have one more from the article, and it goes back to Servius and Macrobius, and this is, I'll read it all in context. Servius, Macrobius quotes the reading in Calvis, Paulin Temque Diem Venerem, and further gives a source for the statement in Servius regarding the custom for men and women to exchange clothes at rites in honor of Venus. After quoting a statement of Levinus that Venus was both male and female and was associated with the moon, Macrobius adds, Philochorus, probably saying that wrong, also in his work on Athens states that she, i.e. Venus, is the moon, and that men in female garb, women in male garb, bring sacrifices to her because she is regarded as both male and female.
Yeah, see. And I found that too. It's just got to kind of make you wonder. That's a whole nother topic. Like, that would be great to talk about. Like, why has all this stuff been hidden? Well, it's just one gender, one sex, one race.
We're talking about polarity. Like, female is only one end of the gender pole.
Yeah, true.
And, I think it's some things like this, it's so in the weeds, like, It's, I don't think it's been hidden. It's just that people don't really know much about mythology at all anymore. So what they do know is like the most basic of it.
Well, what I mean is, by hidden too, is the practical use of ancient knowledge that when incorporated, like that's all the tarot is.
The church. It's
yeah,
the
that's what I'm
church's
saying.
fault.
If we had this being taught, we would have a lot less. Oh my God! It breaks my
So you're
heart
saying
to
we
see
should
the
burn
epidemic
churches?
we have. No way.
I mean,
Not
I wouldn't shed a tear. I'm not saying I'd light the match, but I'm not saying I shed a tear when I hear a church is burned.
Well, I think that there's golden nuggets to be found everywhere, and if we burn them all down, the masses are still going to go to the institution. It's kind of like being a light bearer in the public school system. So much of the public school system is broken, but we got to go out there, and we have to take our place in these places that are broken to fix them. Like that's what the Master Christ did, right? Like he hung out with prostitutes, man. Like she was freaking washing his feet.
Someone's got to wash
alabaster oil, you with her hair, man. Like that's some serious love.
Mm-hmm.
That that's again, was that true or not? It's irregardless. It's a story we should consider and think about. Boy, there's so much to that story. But I wanted to talk a minute about Aphrodite and how her whole, and I think when we see Aphrodite, this is where we see Venus kind of getting corrupted. You know what I mean? Because if you look at, everybody knows when you say Aphrodite immediately what you think.
Pretty woman.
In sex and love and lust and beauty and desire and interrelatedness. And that was just because she even had a cult of people that followed her around on Cythera. And it was an Aphrodite cult. It started there and spread out and to where we see now Venus as used to sell beer and used to wear no clothes on the sidelines in football games and used to sell anything, really, boobs and butt. Well, I think of, and I love Kate Upton. I think she is one of the most beautiful people in the world, but I think of Kate Upton selling the burger. Was it Hardee's? No, it's Hardee's commercial. Eating a burger like she's making love to it and in a garter belt. And God, she's gorgeous. I'm not going to lie. It's very effective. And when you add those two things together, again, we get into the potent power of sex and allure. And even the whole tease leading up to the actual act, the momentum building is part of the ceremony. And foreplay, And that's for another broadcast at the midnight hour, ladies and gentlemen, the adult time. But I'm done. Just wanted to bring out Aphrodite and say, she's gotten a bad rap because she is only was saw as an object. Okay, when we see the divine feminine as only an object, like that's somebody's granddaughter. It's a way to look at it.
Of course.
That's somebody's granddaughter, like, I don't know. I just think there's something to that. And that's the honorable way to handle the feminine. And, what does the feminine look like now out there? I don't know.
OnlyFans.
What's that?
OnlyFans.
OnlyFans. I don't quite look at the divine feminine the way that you do.
No, I mean, that's not how I look at it. I mean, you said, what does the feminine look like today? I mean, that's the state of it. That's not the divine feminine.
Okay, so what do you mean by that?
I mean, when I go on the apps, I see a lot of girls telling me to join their OnlyFans. That's what I mean. I mean, there's a lot of girls on OnlyFans.
I don't know what OnlyFans is. See, I'm on the loop. I do not know what OnlyFans is, dude. Listen, I'm 58 years old.
It's where you can basically subscribe to girls posting nudes, and they will talk to you for money.
No.
Yeah, it's like an amateur porn subscription service where you do it yourself. You're your own
How is that
photographer.
legal?
What do you mean? Porn is legal.
Not selling your body for money isn't.
I mean, as long as there's no one
Mr. in Las
else, like,
Vegas.
as long as there's a camera there, selling your body is totally legal.
That just didn't occur in 1973 when I was 10 years old.
Well, the internet wasn't there yet.
No, the internet did not occur in my entire childhood, and it was amazing. There are no pictures captured of me in the horrible, awkward situations that I was in, except for the Polaroid brownie pictures with no teeth, because I was 8 years old, the horrible haircut, and all that jazz. Other than that, there really aren't any pictures, which is interesting. Not like your life. But you weren't born with the internet either. So
no, I mean, I don't take a lot of pictures either.
It's assimilated into your life.
And when I was, halfway grown up there.
All right. Well, that's all I got on
me too.
Venus. And that was an amazing time learning more about her. I really enjoyed that. And so now we are on to Mars, the last inner planet. And then we get to go to two planets we don't talk a lot about, which is Saturn and Jupiter, which will be good. So I guess I bid you adieu, my friend.
Good night.